who got in whose face?
Get out of my face.
Ow! Oh my God! What the hell was that?
Really?
Oh my God! Oh my God!
In front of the kids?
Yeah.
Really? He literally jumped me.
Come on.
Is that necessary?
Hey.
It's on video. Don't worry.
I was accused of attempted murder. I was accused of sexual assault, mental abuse, physical abuse. I was also accused of molesting the children twice. I also had to hire a criminal attorney for one of my exchanges years ago where I anticipated being arrested upon my arrival on an airplane.
All rise.
I just want to be able to see my daughter.
Like a real man to be.
So you're just living off his child.
We've gone over so many of these cases.
Order in the court.
Before we get into it, let me first say welcome to the Family Court podcast. It's truly an honor to have you here today. And I've been seeing, like I said earlier, I've been watching your work. Now before we get into what you do to help other fathers, which you are basically a divorce coach, right? Or a divorce strategist, which is usually referred to here, at least here in Georgia, is referred to as a divorce coach. So you help fathers understand the process, and also help them how to really cope with the idea of now having their family basically torn apart. You know what I mean? So this person that you used to love is now your worst enemy standing before you, facing a judge that can literally turn your life upside down. So before we get to the work that you do, I kind of wanted to start with your story as to what really happened, anything that you're comfortable sharing as to what happened to you personally that brought you into this journey. Because one thing that I've come to understand, anybody that I've encountered since I started my platform, they have experienced a family court in one way or another, and it's always bad. I have not met not one person, at least a man, that have experienced a family court and say, you know what, I'm happy that I went through that. We're laughing now, but when we were going through, at least speaking for me, when I was going through it, it was devastating. It was terrible. It was terrible. And I will share my story with you a little bit too, but I want to give you the mic and let you open up the floor, and just have this conversation with you.
Yeah, so I'll try to be as concise as I can, but it started, what is interestingly, I learned later on Match.com. So, I think there's an argument to be had for men, make sure you pick right. I mean, that's one that I see and hear all the time. But there are lots of men that, ignore red flags. And I was one of those men. I was young, I was successful, I was doing well, met a woman on Match. Little did I know at the time, I wasn't actually speaking with her. I was speaking with her mother for weeks. So to some extent, the question is, was I a target? And, as things progress, you kind of start to feel like, I was a target as part of this overall process. So long story short, we got married. I was told that she was unable to have kids. We end up pregnant. As I'm, looking to go on my single way, I learned that she is pregnant. Again, for me, being a dad is the single most grateful thing that I have. I mean, it is everything I ever wanted to be. It's everything I want to be. And I think that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, just because I think that there are a lot of men that feel this way. And I don't think people recognize how much being a parent or a father means to men. So that being said, there were red flags. Let's just put it that way. In the process, I was unsure that my second child was mine. She had been arrested for domestic violence while we were in our marriage. Again, one of those scenarios where, looking back, it seemed very much like a setup, and I am blessed beyond belief. And there are a handful of scenarios where I was just the higher power, the universe, something protected me from demise, and that was that my family was present. And my brother had successfully called law enforcement before she had in this kind of setup scenario. I didn't end up in jail. I'm in California, so we have the OJ's law. If law enforcement is called in California, these are things that men need to know in certain states. Law enforcement's called, somebody is going to jail. They are not leaving with somebody. And that somebody, 99.9% of the time, is going to be the man. And even in cases where the man calls first.
Right.
So she ended up in jail. What's crazy is from that jail, her call to me was, get me out of jail, and if you don't, I'm going to ruin your life.
Wow. That's what she said.
That's what she said. I went, I got an attorney. We had an 8-month-old. I won't get into the details of that evening, but we had an 8-month-old. I wanted to be a dad. Like I said, I wanted to be married. I wanted to make it work. I had the divorce paperwork ready. The attorney kicked my family out, and she looked me in the eye and she said, I think you should try it one more time. I will tell you this, and this is why I'm not a firm believer in solely relying on counsel. That was the biggest mistake of my life, because I opted to drop the charges, not file for divorce, not take over custody at the time, and to try to reconcile with my wife.
You know,
And
that's the exact same thing that happened to me. You know, and this is why I say most men, when we get into a marriage, we don't get into a marriage hoping to get a divorce. This is why I see this a lot. When a man gets the option to fix their marriage, they will always choose to fix it as opposed to just walking away. At least the very first time when they had the idea or the thought of going to, you know what I mean? The thought of getting a divorce, you know, is the exact same thing that happened to me. But go ahead.
So I really felt like deep down, I wanted to be able to look my son in the eye and say, listen, I did my part. I tried. And I felt like I hadn't done that. So that was the next step. We ended up pregnant with number 2. Again, some odd scenarios around that. And I didn't find out that he was mine until after the divorce began, just as a side note. I did do the DNA test, but I took him on in California. Same thing. These are things that you have to know going into divorce that you don't until you're down the road. But in California, if you don't secure your rights as a parent in a proceeding, in a dissolution, to get those rights later is impossible or almost impossible. And so in my case, I was like, well, the divorce is going to go forward. I either have to take him on, whether he's mine or not, or I won't be able to take him on. And so long story short, we had a bunch of things going on in the house. And this is where the reconciliation piece is one of the things that I argue for men all the time. Once the thing falls apart, reconciliation is simply a means to change leverage for a woman. If they don't have the upper hand, they're going to spend whatever amount of time necessary. They will lie in wait. They will strategize. They will plan. They will sit on the shelf for years waiting to turn the tables. And so what I experienced was these very odd situations where just, again, this like hyper awareness. I was like, she's trying to turn the tables. I hold all the cards. She's been arrested. I'm the primary parent. Something isn't adding up here. So I started trying to unwind the divorce. And again, and this is the thing too, when you're planning for divorce, how do you do it in a way that it's like stepping on a spring. You can't just jump off the spring or it's going to explode. So it's a balancing act. How do you get off the spring effectively? And so I wouldn't say that I was successful in doing it successfully, because it turned into an explosion of a very high conflict, very long-winded divorce. So I ended up filing for divorce because she absconded with the boys while pregnant with our 3rd child. She went to her parents. You know, there were a bunch of weird tactics in trying to, again, reconcile, work things out. And it was just clear that it was going to be a problem. Now, it was early in the divorce, which is what I think spurred you reaching out to me, that video of the staged assault.
Right.
That was only a couple months into our divorce, and that was quite a long time ago. But I had seen and experienced enough that I knew that I had to protect all sides of me at all times. And that was one of a handful of very sketchy situations at exchanges. You have that situation where it was a staged assault. And for the record, the court found that event to be staged. So, anybody who watches it or
they say it was staged on your part or on their part?
They staged the event in order to secure an assault charge on me and put me
And
out.
even when you look at that video, I don't know, that was your father-in-law, your ex-father-in-law, right? The way that he jumped on the floor as if like it was mind-blowing, you know.
Yeah.
And what you just said earlier about trying to fix things, you know, or they will make you feel like, okay, we can try at this one more time. I literally went down the exact same thing. And I'm thinking, because at the time we were living in a small town, the apartment was under my name. Everything was basically under my name. So what I quickly realized what she was trying to do was she was looking to get a place of her own. So when it comes to custody, she would have a spot as opposed to saying this is the only place that we have. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, they did. I lost. Well, I don't want to say I lost custody, but because we have a 50-50. But going through it, that was the strategy. I'm guessing it had to come from her attorney, because I don't think you know, when it comes to things like this, I don't think is the ex-wife sits there thinking about all these things. I feel like there is some type of a professional that's helping and guiding them through the process on how to turn the table, like you said earlier, you know. But back to your video. So your ex-father-in-law was there, and then there was another gentleman that was behind, and I'm gonna play the video so people can get a visual of what we're talking about. So there was another gentleman that was standing, you know, behind, I can't remember what car it was, but he was standing on the other side by the door. Who was that guy?
So that was I don't know. I think it was a boyfriend. It was sort of shared that it was a boyfriend or a guy she dated for a bit. And again, this was soon after the divorce. And I think he didn't do anything in that video that was problematic. And it's funny because I think that the intent, whether they were serious or not, was to like instill some type of response from me.
Right,
and it didn't. Like,
make you feel
in my mind, I was already like, no, thank you very much. Good luck. But yeah, her boyfriend or whatever guy friend was there present in the background. Her father was the one participating in that whole escapade. And an interesting note too, when you hear me say, call the cops, I'm on the phone. So I had somebody on and my earpiece in the phone, and I'm telling them, because like the chaos that ensues in those situations where you're trying to keep your composure, and you like, it gives me goosebumps now, right? Like,
wow.
The anxiety that you experience and that I watch these men experience is at a level that people could never comprehend unless they've been through it.
Yeah.
And, you know, what we learned though, is that the cops had actually been called before he flopped to the ground.
Wow.
So when the cops showed up, and after I had turned the camera off and I was in the car, there were like 5 or 6 cruisers that pulled up. They didn't ask a question. They handcuffed me and took me to a car, while she and her family went and got their video camera, went and, you know, tried to plead their case that I had just assaulted an elderly in front of his home. And the entire time, it was about 45 minutes, a fire truck shows up to treat the father for whatever he had done to the back of his head off the pavement.
Wow.
I'm sitting in the back of this police car handcuffed. They're trying to take my information. I'm saying, this is a setup. This is a setup. This is a setup. Like, you have to. And by the way, another note, you see her come down and turn off the camera. I was in my car getting the baby out, and I saw her do that out the back window of my car. And I laid down on him because I knew it was on. Like, that's when I knew something was going down.
Right.
Again, even looking back, I have no idea how I got my arm out to the back of the car to get my hands on the camera and then get it back on and back on the roof of my car. Again, it's one of those things that I still have no idea how it happened. And when I was telling them it was a setup, I wasn't sure I had captured the video. When I put it on my roof, I didn't know if I had gotten it back on for real. It was all just like, please God. I'm like, check the camera. I have a camera. Go to my car. They did it. They have me open it up and turn it on. I play the video for one. They get on the radio. Every cop that's down with her family comes up to the car. I play it for all of them. All like 9 cops sat there having me replay the video while they laughed, saying, oh my God, that's LeBron. I think it was the chief, one of their higher ups in the department, handed me the camera, or he uncuffed me, handed me the camera, And he looks at me and he goes, don't ever come back to this property without police escort. Get out of here. And he sent me on my way.
But
So
what I don't understand is, as a father, and I'm talking about your ex-father-in-law, why would you participate in something that you know, whether the divorce, it's, okay, so your daughter, she's no longer with this man. We get that. But they have children together. Can you imagine having your grandchildren growing up and asking you, like, what were you thinking? You get what I'm saying? Like, it's like something gotta be off.
I do, and it's funny that you say that, because it's what you kind of pointed to was there's the ex-spouse in that whole turmoil. You would imagine that the parents are a voice of reason,
Right.
and generally, right, somebody is providing guidance on the back end, whether it's an attorney or a friend, or in this case, a family member that's doing the maniacal stuff, right? Or promoting maniacal behavior. And in my case, her family was as bad as she was, right? They were willing and ongoing participants in almost every exchange until I was able to secure a restraining order against the father.
That is insane. That's insane, because when I was watching, I was watching it with my team. We played it back a couple of times. Like, I just couldn't understand, as a father, again, I'm talking about your ex-father-in-law. Why would you, I don't get that. Like, I was literally at loss for words. I didn't know what to say. You know what I mean? And then with me, it was so bad, right? Because I don't want to go into the detail, but it was so bad that I bought this stripe where you can actually hook a camera. It's like a GoPro on there. I take that every time I am interacting with her and our children. I always have it on me. I have cameras.
I wore a helmet cam to every exchange. And what's crazy about that staged assault was I always had a witness, and I always had that camera that I used, and I always had a helmet camera. What's crazy about that exchange is I forgot my helmet camera and my witness couldn't come. Now, here's what's crazy is, if you think about this, and this is why I say there is a higher being in my situation. If I had the helmet camera, I wouldn't have had that angle, because I wouldn't have had the other camera rolling.
Right.
So it just happened to be the perfect savior in that situation. But her parents would do weird stuff. Like, they came to an exchange where they had taken the trash from my outside of my house and gone through my trash. They delivered the trash back to me at an exchange. Like, weird stuff.
That's crazy.
Weird stuff.
That's crazy. See, I did a podcast, I want to say about 2 weeks ago. He was an Army vet, and he went through something similar to that, where the family of his ex were just stalking him and trying to find ways to just get him either locked up or lose custody of their daughter. And I would never understand that as a family member. It's like you are encouraging this behavior, as opposed to trying to be, like you said, a voice of reason, trying to calm things down, because at the end of the day, they have kids together. These kids they need mom and dad equally. I will never understand that. So let me ask you, you say you guys met on Match.com. How long did you guys dated before you guys got married?
So, great question. So we dated for a few months. She ended up pregnant. I proposed, and we were going to wait until after the baby was born to get married. Okay. Now, an interesting thing here was, it was still only like, let's say we met January. It was thereabouts. She's pregnant by June, and we end up having a wedding ceremony in August. Now, the interesting part about the wedding is that we were going to wait, and, 2 weeks in, I found a venue. And I'm like, okay. And then, I found the perfect dress. And I'm like, okay. And then next thing you know, it's a shotgun ceremony. And again, at that time, like, in my mind, I'm like, great, like, red flags aside, I want to be a dad. Like, she's charismatic. Like, when she's good, right? Like, that's the whole thing of these women. Like, when they can put it on, they put it on.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of like living in this alternate universe. And so the one thing that sort of played to my advantage was, we had a wedding ceremony but we didn't actually get formally married until 1 year later on the same date. So for the public's perception, we had our wedding, we said our vows, we had all of our family and friends, but then we filed the actual wedding paperwork 1 year later.
Okay.
So it all in all, though, here's what's crazy. The divorce, or sorry, the marriage was 18 months, thereabouts long. We had 3 kids, and the divorce lasted more than 10 years.
How was that possible? Hold on. So married for 18 months, divorced for 10 years. Please explain that. Is that some type of a California law, or what was it?
California is a unique state in that they take long to do anything. But you also have to understand that when you've got an uncooperative party, it can get real messy. So thankfully, in my case, the judge that was on the bench at the time, thankfully, the judge at the time, when we were in our interim orders stuff and going through all these different hearings, he did what's called bifurcating the case. So he separated the divorce with custody. And there were 2 separate issues. And so we put the divorce aside and he said, we need to get these kids in a better situation. So when the process started, she ended up giving birth to our 3rd child. I didn't learn about his birth until 2 days after he was born. I saw him for a total of 2 hours for the first 3 months of his life. I had to get the court to provide guidance for me seeing him. And so for that period of time, though, we shared the other 2 boys 50-50. And basically all that happened was you had somebody who was misbehaving, we'll talk about it, all along, right? Just so brazen, your typical woman that thinks she's going to get away with anything and everything.
Right.
And you had Mr. OCD over here that wasn't willing to kill a fly at the time, right? Like it was, I wasn't going to lie, I wasn't going to cheat, I wasn't going to steal. And I can tell you that people were always saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. And it was one of those things where I was just not willing. I couldn't sleep at night. I wasn't going to bend the truth. I wasn't going to take advantage of what was available to me to do that. But we bifurcated the case. Now, you said something earlier, and that was, I've never heard a good story. This case went on for 9 months, and from, let's say, August until the following April, I saw the infant for 2 hours a week at exchanges. So I would spend 2 hours with him, or an hour at each exchange. 1 hour with the other 2 boys at somewhere local to the police station. And then at another time when I didn't have the boys. And that was really hard. And the argument being made was he's breastfed only. He doesn't drink from a bottle, and he drinks every hour on the hour. So the court naturally is going to be like, well, okay.
But that was a good argument. Yeah. But I mean, that's evil, but that's a good argument. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's where it is evil. At the exchanges, after I dropped them, she'd go to the back of her car, open up the back of the car, and feed him with a bottle. I kid you not.
Wow.
And just like kind of be like, there you go. So over that 9 to 12 months, it was this, and this is the thing that I try to say to men. You are going to lose battles. Like, there will be battles lost. You will leave court unhappy. You will be tested to the absolute end of your being. But if you have a plan and a strategy and you can stay dedicated to that cause, you can come out on top.
Absolutely.
We had 5 days, which is unheard of in California, 5 days worth of trial. I'll talk about some of the details later. At the end of the trial, we had a 24-page statement of decision, which also is rare out of California, issued in writing by the judge. He provided 100% custody to me, sole legal, sole physical. He ordered a 9-month-old baby to be weaned off mother within the next 3 weeks and to be provided to me 100% of the time. She was given no overnights, and she was given monitored visits going forward. Wow. The judge recognized, based on all of the evidence, what I would call my Bible, and all of the clarity that I was able to compile and provide, the totality of evidence didn't allow him to make a ruling against me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to say that that ruling turned into an easy scenario up until now, because it hasn't been. It wasn't. And I've continued to take losses. Public policy is designed to force men to take losses.
Right.
But in that time of like absolute dire, no light at the end of the tunnel, seeing your infant almost never, having your boys 50% of the time, being harassed every way from Sunday, accused of ungodly things, you realize that there is a chance to come out on top, and staying true to your cause is the only way to get there, is my message. And so that's it. I mean, there's a chance.
That sound like you went through it, man. It's like, I think, to your point, I think the mistake that many of us make is that we try to rush these things, when in reality, it's actually a marathon as opposed to a sprint. You have to take your time. You have to be organized. And I've met people, because I'm a paralegal here in Georgia, and I got my paralegal certificate specifically just for this platform to be able to help men, And again, I connect them with attorneys. I'm not an attorney. I want to make that very clear. But I've met men, when they present the case to you, it's like, I see why the judge will never give you any type of custody. It's like, we don't take the time to really put these paperwork together, put the evidence together, put the arguments together. Even sometimes just the way that you show up before a judge, the way that you dress, the way that you clean yourself, all those things plays a part in that decision making whenever the judge is looking at your case and say, okay, this dad may be good, or this dad, I think he should be able to handle 50-50, or many of them just don't have that idea. And again, it's hard to blame someone, when you get into a relationship, like I was saying earlier, your mind, it's never on, okay, her and I, we're going to get a divorce one day, and then the person that you marry, it's never the person that you divorce. I found out the hard way. For her, she was literally sitting across from me telling the judge that I've abused her, and some of the things that she have listed, I was literally, when I think about it, it's like, I can't believe that I came out of that. And I had 3 attorneys. So I had an immigration attorney, I had a divorce attorney, and I had a criminal attorney, because of all the allegations that she told them that I did to her and also to our children. You know what I mean? Yeah. So can you just imagine dealing with all this? I can't tell you the amount of money that I've spent, and again, to come out of that, it was literally a miracle, But one thing that I like to really emphasize whenever I do have these conversations with people like you is that this experience could have turned you into a monster, someone just crazy and just going after her and just, you could have gone online and just started coming up with all this negative things to say about her. But instead, you have created a platform where you are now helping other men, now wishing for them to get a divorce, but helping them. If divorce knocks on your door, you know how to handle it. You know how to present yourself, so I truly applaud you for that. All right, so
I want to touch on something, because you just hit a really big vein on it. And let's talk about allegations and evidence and things that are potentially brought against men, because I think that's the other thing. It's you don't imagine that somebody that you were sleeping with a month before, sharing a house and a home and a family with, caring for, willing to die for, right? As a man, that's our job. We're the protectors of a family unit. Would willingly do anything in the world to ruin your life to win. And so let me give you some examples that will blow your mind. 1, you saw the video of the staged assault. 2, this was early in the case. We were sitting in the courtroom. I had an attorney, we're sitting in the hallway of the court, and her attorney drops a folder on our lap. And I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of like, she starts sifting through it, and you see my attorney's face go ghost white, then anger, and she looks at me and hands it to me, and she's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "What is it?" And I open it up, and they're pictures of my ex with a bloody lip, bloody nose, black eye, scraped, bruised, so physically beaten. And I'm like, oh, and I kind of start to laugh. My attorney almost fired me on the spot. She's like, "You're in big trouble." And I go, "Hold on. No, I'm not." And she's like, "I don't understand. You have some explaining to do." I reached down into my briefcase. Again, another lucky thing. I pulled out the phone that those pictures were taken on. I ended up forcing her, so we built a strategy right there on the spot. We had her mom, her sister, and a cop. One of her sisters is a cop. Testify to the validity of those pictures, stating that I had caused those injuries against her. I then took that phone and had an expert image, which is basically analyze the metadata on those pictures. Those pictures were taken before I had met her.
Wow. So she came out of an abusive relationship, or she just fabricated those pictures?
She had gotten in a fight with a woman, another girl, before I had met her, and she had taken pictures of her injuries. She then brought them to court saying that those were injuries that I had physically assaulted her. I was accused of attempted murder. I was accused of sexual assault, mental abuse, physical abuse. I was also accused of molesting the children twice. I also had to hire a criminal attorney for one of my exchanges years ago, where I anticipated being arrested upon my arrival on an airplane. So, because they typically will arrest you, ask questions later. Right. And so I was coming in for, my time, and my family law attorney's like, you need to be picked up by an attorney so that he can bail you out right away. So yes, they will literally do and say anything. And the problem with this system is this: it incentivizes them to do that because it's always believe women. And yes, women are abused. It's the nuclear button that they can use at any point in time. And so to that end, you have to manage yourself as a man, knowing that. Yeah. Equally important too, that I think a lot of men forget, and to your point, which is preparation for how do you present yourself? How do you put your case on? We shoot ourselves in the foot more times than we don't. So we have an uphill battle. We have to climb Mount Everest, but we then go shoot ourselves in the foot and say, all right, I'm ready to climb. You're never going to make it to the top if you are making the wrong steps, the wrong decisions along the way. And that's what I spend most of my time doing, is going, you can't say that. You can't do that. I know you're angry. Put it to the side. Ignore this. Don't engage with that. We're just so hung up on where we're being wronged, forgetting that it's a marathon. We're busy trying to sprint, and that's where we fail.
Yeah. It's really hard to blame, and I understand where you're coming from, but sometimes it's hard to blame men, because imagine being lied to, and I'm thinking, because you're getting all these mixed emotions, my life, it's literally over. I got to go stand before this judge. How am I going to bring, evidence, or how am I going to prove myself to be not that person that she's painting me to be? One thing that saved me at the time, we were living again in a small town. We were close to Florida. And it was roughly after COVID, something like that, and everything was slow. And I had a restaurant, but the restaurant wasn't performing well after COVID. Make extra cash. So all the allegations and the dates and time that she said I did all those crazy things to her, I was able to then show them I wasn't even in town. Because sometimes I would go to Jacksonville, Florida, for example. I would stay overnight, and I'll come the next day. So when they started putting the timing together, it just didn't match. And that's the thing that really saved me, And after those allegations, like I said earlier, I bought me a GoPro. Everywhere that I go, everywhere that she is, I have to have my camera. I'm so paranoid now, I tell you, because it's never over, especially if you have small children. You will deal with this woman for 17, 18 years, and for many of us, you are literally going to deal with her for the rest of your life. And this is what I tell men, you have to be careful. It's easier said than done. I get it. But when you started going through that family court, you wish that you had taken your time to really vet this person before you shared your life with them, because they will use everything that they can, like you said earlier, against you whenever it comes to that. And again, that brings me to the point I was trying to make earlier. I'm at a point where I don't blame the family court system anymore. I blame the person that you are with, because at the end of the day, they are the one that starts this little fire basically under you, and then the system takes that opportunity and then just amplify it. and make it even worse for you. You know, and I was talking to an attorney once, and I was like, imagine if you come to a courtroom and the judge looks at both of you guys and say, you know what, I don't know what y'all got going on, but you guys have to find a way to fix it because everything will be down the middle 50-50. Can you imagine a judge having, or that's the first word that comes out of a judge's mouth? It will literally cut down all this problem, all this bickering and fighting in the courtroom and all this other stuff. Anyway, so moving from the hell that you that you went through with your ex. But before we get to the question I have, let me ask you, so how is your relationship with her now?
Interesting. We recently had a very good, positive conversation, one that we hadn't had in 10 plus years. I think there was some closure around it. This video popped, so I think it's made things a little bit more interesting. It garnered way more visibility than I ever imagined. And let me tell you, when I shared it with some other platforms, it was, I'm thinking, a couple thousand people might see it and we can raise some awareness and drive home the point that I'm trying to make. And, as it hits millions, I'm going, oh boy, that changes the perspective for anybody involved in it. It's not, listen, it's not easy. There's an ongoing, consistent effort to be diligent, to be aware. I will say this, I am always willing to be amicable and studious and kind and co-parent. That's my dream. And I actually said that to her recently. I was like, my dream is to be the pillar of our community where we show up to a game for our kids and they go, look at those two. They don't even, they hate each other's guts, but look at them. They're cheering their kid on, right? Yeah. Now, the difference is, and this is the reason I made that point, was because if I show up at the boys' games, even though she has no restraining order, she calls the cops and tells the kids that if your father shows up, I'm taking you off the field.
Why?
Because she doesn't want me there.
That's so evil. That is crazy.
So when I answer that question, it's a mixed bag. I am always optimistic, right? It's like I'm always happy to and willing to try to be amicable. I want that for the boys, and I think that's another thing too, just as it relates to the co-parenting and the relationship piece. Something I had to tell her the other day was she was very clearly hung up on whether she's a good mom or not. And, historical evidence aside, I made it clear to her that I'm not in the game of determining whether you're a good mom or not. I'm not with you when you parent the boys. And when you come up in our house, if you come up in our house, I'm your advocate. You literally are held on a pedestal with our children. You are talented, you are smart, you are athletic, you can sing, you are everything that I would want a mom to be to them. Their opinion of you and their determination is on them to figure out. It is not my responsibility to make you be anything other than a great mom. So if their opinion of you is different than that, that's on you and your relationship with them. And so I think that's a really important thing to hold on to as a man in all of the turmoil. And I say it all the time, right? Kids will be adults a lot longer than they're going to be children.
Right.
And it's a piece of strength too when you're losing. When things aren't going your way, put that ego aside. I know you want your kids. I know you want that time. I know you want the things that you want, but don't pressurize that for them. Yeah. And it's going to end up fine, even if it takes longer than you want, to your point of patience. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I think that's the way it is. I wish that it would be more cooperative. I'm all for it. Always would be. Even if we left that stage to Salt, if she said, hey, can we co-parent? Sure. Okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
So,
but studies have shown that when it comes to co-parenting, after a conflict, divorce, men are usually never the problem. Like, we can literally throw it under the bus, and just forget about it. How do we move forward? But mothers or women, again, I'm not trying to be sexist, but this is what studies are showing, right? Mothers, they don't give us that same courtesy. For them, it's like, especially when they lose custody, you are just this big monster. You are the enemy. They have to come and destroy you. you know.
Right.
But to your point, I think it's very, very good that to always remember that you have to at least foster a good relationship with your kid's mother. No matter how bad the relationship was, or no matter how bad the divorce was, at the end of the day, you have to be the one to lead or to at least initiate or try to maintain that good relationship with her. I know it's easier said than done because I've been there. I'm at a point where with mine now, we don't even speak on the phone anymore because every time we do speak, she twists my words and she will find something that is just negative. Although we could be having a good conversation, but she will find a way to twist it. So I told her from now on, just email me, you know.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I'll email you, you email me. That way, before I press send, I can read it 4 or 5 times to make sure that my language in that email, it's not too strong, it's not offensive, you know, it's very friendly, it's kind and all this other stuff. And when you receive it, I'm hoping that you'll read it in the manner that I wrote it. You get what I'm saying? So it's tough though. So let's talk about your your mental health when you were going through it. And I know you have been to a point where you just wanted to just quit or just walk away from your children or walk away from it. And I'm sure you're going to say it was your kids that kept you going. But if you can give us a little more detail, what was it that really had you, you know, just saying to yourself, I can't give up on this fight. I have to stand strong. I have to keep moving forward.
You know, that's a really good question, and it's a tough one to answer because I look back and at the time, I couldn't tell you what it was. I really couldn't. And even in times where, and I'm going to kind of take a side tangent for a second, even in the times where it got really crazy, the stage assault, different exchanges where I'm being baited. If you were to ask me even today, how would you respond if this happened to you? I'd say, well, that guy would be laying on his back. I'd be in jail because there's no way I'm going to be able to control myself if I'm assaulted or somebody runs up on my back or somebody's in my face or somebody's swearing. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm a man. I mean, my natural response is to be protective and reactionary and hypervigilant. So even now, when I look back at all those situations, the only thing I can say is when I recall it, in those moments, I literally lived in a box where all I could think was
God was with you, right?
If I screw up, if I think of anything but these kids who I'm holding on to or I'm watching or I'm seeing, I'll never see them again.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was my box. That was my blinders. It was, nothing else existed in my life at that moment because everything else could be figured out after. So I would say the way that I got through it was a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine was like, we're going to do this one day at a time. It's one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. So some days it was a grind, right? I mean, and when we talk grind, we're talking like financial strain and ruin. We're talking, how are you going to get gas? How are you going to make it to the exchange? How are you going to pay for the monitors? Like, you name it, like every single burden that you can imagine lands on a man's shoulders throughout the process in any capacity, right? Not just mine, every man. And you have to kind of step back and go one day at a time, one day at a time. And you have to get into a space where you understand that they will recognize your persistent consistency. Kids are very resilient, and it's the hardest part is putting away your heart in those moments with the kids, focusing on when you have the time with your kids, dedicating it to them, dedicating it to only them, not trying to push a narrative, change their opinions, anything, not thinking about your situation. It was, for me, that's really easy and kind of a cop-out to say, well, it was the boys. That was what kept me going. It was, I don't know, maybe my upbringing. I hate quitting anything. And especially hate quitting the little ones that I brought into this world. And so for me, it was just one day at a time. We're going to get through this, even in situations where, timeshare isn't what I like, what I want. maybe what they don't want, you name it. At some point, right? I look at my relationship with my parents, right? It's like a vast majority of my life where I remember it and I have choice. I'm much older. I'm at a decision-making age, right? I could, if something had gone on in my life at a younger years, I could look back and reflect and see, hey, this person was the problem. This person was the instigator. This person talked poorly about so-and-so. That was the other one that I had an old client give me really great feedback about her experience in divorce. And it sort of always played in my mind. She gave me the example. Her parents got divorced when she was 3. And her father was a weekend warrior dad, as most dads tend to be. And that's fine. I mean, I think it's an unequal, unjust scenario, but she pointed out that even at 3, 4, 5 years old, she'd go and have her time with her dad and she'd have an absolute blast. She'd come home. She'd want to talk about how much fun she had. And her mom and her grandmother would just take a dump all over that. They wouldn't let her talk about it. They wouldn't let her share it, nothing. And the outcome of that was she loved her dad more. She grew to protect her dad more. It forced her to her dad. Yeah. So for me, it was always, I'm never going to put my kids in that situation, no matter what I'm experiencing. They will figure it out. They understand it. They're going to get to a point where they're going to have and need and decide what they need when the time comes. I'll be there to support it. So that was the only way I made it through it, one day at a time.
So 2 things that you say there. The first one, it's having a good support system when you're going through this process. And with you had your friend that was there, keep telling you, just reminding you, we're going to take this one day at a time. And one thing I've noticed, especially on my group, I have a couple private groups, and all together, I want to say now we're growing to about 6,000 fathers, right? And all of them, I would say about maybe 60% of them, when they were going through it, and some are still going through right now, they always isolate themselves. And when I was going through it, I did the exact same thing, and I turned to drinking, and it got to the point where I couldn't function really without drinking, and the danger in that. My divorce took 2 years, and it wasn't until once everything was finalized, my pancreas just started hurting. I don't know what it was. It just started just this crazy pain. And then I went to now this is a year after, I went to the doctor, and they told me that now it wasn't a severe case, but they told me it was getting there because of excessive drinking. And mind you, when I went to the doctor visit, I have not had any drink for about at least 6 months. You see what I mean? So it's like, if you don't find that support system, and it's like you dig yourself this hole where you think that nobody will be able to understand or nobody will be able to help you. And I know people that they return to, drugs and just crazy things. These things will catch up to you later on, and I know people, and I hate talking about this, but I know people that I've literally spoke to them today. The next day I'm calling to check up on them. The family members telling me they're no longer here because they just couldn't deal with the pressure, so that was nice of your friend to really be there with you and walk with you through that entire process. And the second thing that you said, and again, you have to be the bigger person. And this is one thing that I usually emphasize, and I try to really scream it as loud as I possibly can. You have to always be the bigger person and trying to be, trying to foster a good relationship with their mother, no matter how bad she's treating you. You always have to be, because at the end of the day, believe it or not, like you said, your kids will grow up and they will know who is the bad parent, who is the good parent, or at least who is trying to have a good relationship with the other parent. They will find out sooner or later, and I'm at a point where I don't even talk to them about anything. I never did, but I'm at a point literally, like when I have them, that's my moment with them. Nothing else matters. It's just me and them. Let's enjoy this moment. Let's have a beautiful time. Just a beautiful, unless they bring something to me, but I tend not to, nothing. You know what I mean? So those are really, really good points. So her family members, are you in somewhat of a contact with them, or is just F them? I don't want to deal with them at all.
No, they are, I think they are a major instigator in any disruption. I think they're a major problem. She knows that I feel this way. I actually brought it up. I was like, your family is as much the problem as you are. We actually just talked about this within the last month when we had our little closure meeting. It's the family's no help, and that's unfortunate. You hope for that to be the case. I can't say that it is or isn't. I mean, I've seen it both ways with guys that I help. It's a dangerous scene just in general. Because you don't know what the other side really going to bring to the table in that regard.
Right. That is so true. All right, so let's move on to what you do now to help fathers. I wanted to start with preparation. So when you were going through it, at what point did you say, you know what, okay, I got to take these things seriously? And I know most men, sometimes when they get hit with the divorce papers, it's like we just brush it off. You know what I mean? So at what point was it for you to say, you know what, okay, I want to take this seriously? Will I sit down? I don't know if you hired an attorney or you consulted an attorney, or you just started taking matter into your own hands and you got to the point where you said, okay, I have to bring in a professional. How was it for you?
Yeah. So for me, in my case, I would say what I do today is what I wish I had when my case started. Right. But I'll get to what I do today later. I knew that I wasn't messing with a slouch very quickly. I mean, I knew that I was in big trouble when she was arrested during our marriage, and the following year or so, where her behavior changed drastically. Like I said, turning the table. So it naturally raised the hackles on my neck, and I just became hyper aware of my surroundings, certain messages, things that would be kind of created for the perception of. And so I really just started to kind of like keep a log in my head and start getting organized. I actually hired a full-time nanny. She wanted it, who lived in our home. But I was on board with that because I wanted a witness. I knew that I needed somebody around and aware on an ongoing basis. That nanny actually was one of the key elements of me finally making the decision to file for divorce. There were things that I learned were happening that you wouldn't know if the nanny wasn't there, right? You wouldn't be aware of that witness, that person who brought things to your attention that, that's the whole idea of it. Thankfully, again, kind of, dotted an I and crossed a T. But having kind of started the process the first time and then walked away in reconciliation, I knew what I would need to do. I also had somebody in my life early on that was a very big advocate, gave me the strength and the focus to stay dedicated when it got hard, right? Was sort of that like outlet and guidance for me that I definitely owe a lot to through that time of, for example, you get served paperwork and you've never been served paperwork, or you have they try to file a restraining order on you or some false allegation. It's like deer in headlights. You can't even process it. You don't even know how to respond emotionally, mentally. You don't know what the next step is. Even with an attorney, they don't work through the intraday stuff, and most men can't afford to have them on speed dial for every single question that comes up throughout the process. So for me, it was really, I did have attorneys. I also spent an amount of money that you can never get back. You wish you could use it on the kids, is astronomical. It's unconscious. It's insane. But all of that spent in places, in my mind, to protect myself or to protect the kids. So in my situation, a complete necessity. So that's what it is. But I think for me, I'm very detail oriented. I did seek, different fathers' rights groups. There wasn't a lot of it back, 10 years ago. It wasn't very organized. We didn't have the same social media functionality. We didn't have the same access. It wasn't organized. And so, I just felt chaotic, and my family helped me a lot, but I'm very detail oriented. I took copious notes. I documented everything. I also recognize, this is another piece too, when you have an attorney, you need to concede client attorney control. So yes, I have my beliefs and my wants and my desires, but an attorney is going to say I can or can't argue this legally. And you have to accept what can or can't be argued legally. And you have to make sure, and I was very conscious of this, you don't do something that's going to disrupt your legal argument. And so for me, it was just that organization and hyper focus was the only way that I got through it. But it's also why I do what I do now, because I couldn't replicate it. I couldn't do it again. Right. It was
Yeah.
too chaotic.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Even my platform, when I was going through it, I couldn't really find too many fathers group, and then my divorce wasn't too long ago, but I couldn't find one. And when I started this platform, to be honest with you, the way it blew up, it was never planned. It just happened. And then, the stuff that I started sharing, it just started resonating with people. And the next thing you know, there's hundreds of thousands of us that are going through the exact same thing, So yeah, it's really crazy. So you guys served, because I kind of want to walk through the process of, being served, preparing your case, standing before the judge, and getting the result that you were fortunate enough to be able to get. That most fathers, I think your case, since I started this podcast, I've only talked to 2 people that I call the unicorn, that was basically able to get what you were able to win. The majority of people don't get that, and you would get regular visitations if you're lucky, but most of them are getting supervised visitations, and I remember in my own case initially, because when I filed, because I filed for divorce. When I filed initially and all these allegations was raised against me, the judge gave me 1 day, which was a Sunday, 1 hour supervised visitation a week. That's all I had. And at the time, mind you, I was a manager with Walmart, and the store that I was sent, it was literally 3 hours away from her. So I would drive 3 hours to go spend 1 hour with our kids, and then I have to drive back. So on the days that my family wants to come, and this is another thing that we don't talk about as much, when my family wants to come to see the children, so I have to drive, so it becomes now a 4 hour, because I have to go pick them up and then drive with them to her location, see the kids, and then drive back home. You know what I mean?
Right.
The thing that we don't talk about often, and I know most mothers do this, they think that when they're keeping the kids away from you, the father, it's only affecting you, the father, when in reality, it affects not only you, the father, the children, and also your family, because your mother, your father want to be able to see their grandchildren. They can't have access to them because she's acting a certain way, But back to the point that I was trying to make. So, all right, so you prepare your case, you got served. So did you hire your attorney right after you got served, or you took
So I actually filed as well. She had
Okay.
taken off with the kids, and she was trying to reconcile and force me into a situation that I knew was a setup kind of early. Like, I knew right away. She was with her family. I knew they were a problem. She had been estranged from them in the past, so I knew it was just an ugly scene. So I hired an attorney. I did consult with the attorney, like, where, from a strategic standpoint, where do we sit in terms of what makes the most sense? Like, I would like to be amicable in this. I don't want it to be a big fight. I'm agreeable to 50-50, et cetera. And his position was, or her position was, no, you don't get into that game. You, in California, at least, you want to be the petitioner. There are some kind of legal elements to being the petitioner versus the respondent. And so we need to file and serve her. And if you want to back off or you want to change things, you can always do that. But you don't want to be caught off guard or in response. So we knew right away that we needed to be very aggressive, and that's what we did. We also knew that you want to ask for more and assume that you're going to get less. Same kind of thing. We were never, going to be agreeable to, every other weekend.